Magello's next. We got a test, and then Barcelona's next. You're in. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, I'll have that.
Boom.
Sink or swim,
Take
bro.
that.
I had
Take
no
that.
idea what I was doing. I was, the first time you see telemetry firing across the screen, you're like,
What's going on?
hey, man, what am I looking for, bro? Somebody help me. My first race with Max, I don't know this kid at all. It's like he's this fiery kid from Toro Rosso, and he rocks up, and yeah, it's racing. The Mercedes tangled at Barcelona, opened up the race, and that was my first race win in Formula One. The thing that became very clear very quickly was his ability to do this race engineer's wet dream conundrum, which was go fast, save tires. I think it was one of the things that he had over his teammates, especially like Hulkenberg. Um, he just had the sense for it. There's those generational talents in the field right now, and I think you've got Alonso still, you've got Seb, you've got Lewis for sure, and then I think Max has cemented himself as one of those generational talents. In the heat of the moment, if somebody's like, "What the f? The brake maps are terrible," I'd be like, well, that's on me.
Yeah, yeah, get
Like
it.
that's on me, and I'm like, right, I'm not going to do that again. But for the most part, working relationship was awesome. I didn't leave because I didn't like the
Right.
place.
Yeah.
I left because 10 years of doing any one thing is enough for me.
If you could go back and tell Blake of, I don't know, 10 years ago, this is the one thing that you'll need to do. Obviously, there'll be 1,000,001, but the one most important thing that you'll need to do to get that job for an F1 team, what would be that tip?
Don't listen to anybody that says it's not possible.
Welcome to the F1 Hour, Blake. How are you doing, sir?
I'm spectacular, mate. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm all right, mate. All the better for speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I can't wait to get into some F1 talk.
I've had this penciled in my calendar. I'm like, right, we're talking to Cameron tonight. Tonight's the night, man.
Go tonight.
I'm really glad to be here having a conversation with you. Been looking forward to this.
Oh, mate, you're an absolute legend, Blake. So let's talk about you first and foremost. Like anybody who's been paying attention, I know your YouTube channel is doing bits, Twitch, TikTok, all the rest of it. But for those that don't know, the uninformed, talk to me, Blake, for a couple of minutes about your route into F1 as a Texan, a North American no less. Yeah. How did you get into F1, and how did you come to work for the blue and red car that is Red Bull?
Yeah, I think that the motorsport villain story or hero story, whichever one, I don't know which one it is yet. It started with a little racing series called Spec Miata, or Spec MX5, which I think it's called here. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was probably 20. I was like, cool, these cars, driving technique, you're wrenching on the machines, figuring out how to make them go quicker.
Love that.
And I was like, well, okay, this is cool. I had, I'll be honest with you. I'm 18, 19 years old. I don't watch Formula One. Like, if you live in the UK, probably, from any age you can hold your head up, you've probably seen a Grand Prix on the TV. So I was a late arrival, which was at some point disheartening because you see the people that eat, breathe, sleep, and bleed motorsport, Formula One, everything else. So that got me started. Snowball into, right, I want to be a mechanical engineer. My university had a very good Formula SAE team, or Formula Student as it's called here in England and Europe as well. That ignited this passion for engineering, learning, analytical approaches to things, lots of hands-on work, lots of building race cars from scratch. They were super cool. If you've never seen them, they're phenomenal little things. Universities all over the country and all over the world are making these things, and these guys and girls are competing. And a lot of them, their goal is to get a job in Formula One. I didn't know what Formula One was until I started doing this.
Wow.
I heard about a couple of universities in the UK, and I heard a bunch of other American guys and a couple of gals as well coming over here. Full send,
Full send.
Pack up everything move to this weird place called England, wherever that is. It's like it's across the ocean or something. And then, a year at a motorsport master's degree at Oxford Brookes and see what happens. A lot of people go home empty-handed. Not necessarily. They expected to not go home and stay there. Some of them went back to the US to do other motorsport topics. Some of them changed gears completely. But there's a handful of people over the years that have been coming over here and getting stuck in. And I knew it was like, this is my chance. I have to go here because it gets me in the country. It gets me to meet the people. It gets me to learn more about motorsport. Another year to try and advance my knowledge.
Fair.
But at the end of the day, you think all this stuff's great. And then you rock up your first day at Force India and you're like, man, I've got no idea what I'm doing here. And they're like, don't worry. I was there once. Yeah.
Love it.
Well, most of the stuff you learn on the spot. So that's kind of my that's kind of like my path. And it was this very uncertain, relatively untrodden. You see a couple of examples in the in the social media and Facebook, and you're like, hey, this guy went over there. You see somebody in LinkedIn. But it was like it's a cool story being an American getting over here. It's a lot more common now, but it's still also very difficult for non-UK, non-EU people to get jobs in Formula One still. So
absolutely, or anyone, Blake.
Yeah,
you're one of you're the 99th percentile. I mean, competing for that job or both of those jobs that you got, ultimately you've nailed it, right? I don't think you want to do yourself a disservice there.
No, but at the same time, it's everything in life is a little bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time, and you still have to be the right person for the job, but like everybody thinks it's impossible. No, it's not impossible because I'm just some dork. And two, you have to give yourself all the best odds that you can to be able to succeed. And at the end of the day, it's brutal.
Just a little bit, mate.
Super brutal.
Super competitive. So go on then, Blake, quickly, because I know we'll have a ton of people on the channel who are like, well, I fancy a bit of that. And
if you fancy that, full send on it. Look around, do your research, and give yourself the best opportunity. It's not for everybody. You can't just tell everybody you can do whatever you want. It's like, you got to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then look at what you need to succeed in that field and see if that's you.
Love that. A bit of critical path analysis. So follow-up question, Blake. So I know you've talked on one of your latest YouTube videos about how difficult it is. But before we get to that, what's your one tip for success? If you could go back and tell Blake of, 10 years ago, this is the one thing that you'll need to do. Obviously, there'll be 1,000,001, but the one most important thing that you'll need to do to get that job for an F1 team, what would be that tip?
Don't listen to anybody that says it's not possible.
Love that, mate. Love that.
I'll tell you a quick anecdote on that. I have a guy that we ran Mazdas with. I have so much respect for him, and he came to me from a place of love, and he's like, man, that sounds absolutely crazy. And he was like constructive. He's like offering me some other paths. He's like, look, here's these NASCAR teams. Here's these IndyCar teams. You can go, you can be on these guys' doorsteps tomorrow if you wanted to. And he sent me a message a couple years later. He's like, hey, man, I'm really glad you didn't listen to me.
Mate.
I think that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from that one.
I love that. So then go on then. Talk to the next steps. Force India.
Yeah, so my background was vehicle dynamics, so I wanted to be a vehicle dynamicist. Realistically, when you rock up, you have no idea what you're doing. You might know a little bit, and you might think you're pretty clever, but at the end of the day, it's humbling when you show up. But it just throws you back on this super steep learning curve again, and most of the people that have set themselves out to be that, that 1% that is eligible, that's applicable, that they're looking at their CVs in the first place, you've already got like that hunger for that kind of stuff. So vehicle dynamics, for a very short stint, I was involved in the simulator running there, correlating models, making sure everything made sense, preparing setups, looking over things from a vehicle dynamics point of view. So I had very little trackside experience other than racing hairdressers' cars,
The old MX-5.
Yeah,
love it.
Dude, they're great.
They're incredible. Which mark is your tipple? Mark 2, 1.8.
It was the MB 1.8. Yeah.
Love that.
And they're just good cars.
Incredible cars.
They're cheap to race. They're expensive as hell to race. But so, job comes up. I go ask my boss. I'm like, hey, the head of race engineer. I was like, hey man, I want to be a performance engineer one day. He's like, cool, just get in line. It wasn't a go away thing. It was like, you gotta do your time. Long story short, one of the performance engineers like leaves very abruptly, and they're like, right, what was it? Magello's next. We got a test, and then Barcelona's next. You're in. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, I'll have that.
Boom.
Sink or swim,
Take
bro.
that.
I had
Take
no
that.
idea what I was doing. I was, the first time you see telemetry firing across the screen, you're like,
What's going on?
hey man, what am I looking for, bro? Somebody help me. And the big thing was like, first thing was making sure you don't set the brakes on fire, which is a little play on
Wow.
where I got my name from. But I may or may not have been an accomplice to burning one of the old BJM cars down at Magny-Cours.
Wow. Do tell, Blake. Are you allowed to, or still?
Yeah. It was a stupid story. Basically, it was a test, and it was an interesting circuit. We hadn't been there in a while, and there was an issue with one of the brake drums. It was leaking. So when the brakes get cold, they fall asleep. So you add a little bit of blanking to the inlet caps, cover it up a bit, get a bit more heat in there, less cooling. Well, that's running fine. Then afternoon, we've left the car. We set the tape in the morning, late afternoon, peak of the temperature, lunchtime's already come and gone. This is 5 p.m. sun setting. We're in Magny-Cours. And then final run of the day, I'm like, hey man, to the race, I was a performance engineer. I go to the race engineer. I was like, hey man, rear brakes on this car very hot. And as one does at the end of a session, you do grid starts at the end of the session. So you finish your flying lap, take the line, get a grid slot. Don't lay too much rubber. Pull away.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, we can't stop the car. He's like, I don't think it's right. I'm like, he's like, I think it's a sensor issue. I was like, okay, I don't think it is because there's other sensors. The car goes for a stop. It holds revs. Then the rear right corner of the car catches on fire. I don't think we scuffed a gearbox, but it definitely the whole upright, brake drums, wishbones, knackered, bro.
Oh,
Gonzo.
mate.
Thus,
Jeez.
brake is born. Brake tape.
And that was your first. That was your first session in the big roll.
No, that was like months into it. I was pretty comfy at that point. That wasn't the first test. I didn't screw anything up the first time. But yeah, so performance engineering for a year and a bit with DeResta and Perez there. Then I saw a job going at Red Bull. I was like, everybody aspires, or most people aspire to work for one of the big teams. Absolutely. Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull. It's like these are the names that are, Force India was a great team. I love it, and I learned a lot there. They even did a lot of stuff better than Red Bull were doing when I went there, in my opinion.
Wow, go into details here, mate. I've got so many bloody questions, Blake. Are you allowed to?
No, not too many details about that, but it's like you start to understand the strengths and weaknesses of a small team versus a big team.
Love that.
In short, and it's nothing like super like they did this or they did this, but it's like you start to see it, and you don't. If you've been in that big team for that long, you don't see those things, and so I had a new appreciation for it. So I got the job as Seb's performance engineer. I was going to be Seb's performance engineer in 16.
And then
was it? No. Yeah, it was 16.
And then he pissed off. Yeah.
And then it was 15. Sorry, it was 15. And then he went to Ferrari. And then little did I know, the race engineer Jean-Pierre Lambiase, who I worked with the whole time, he also got the job at Red Bull. So we both left from Force India, and we show up at Red Bull. I'm like, this is awkward. That was good. I get on with him very well. And we had my entire trackside career was working as a performance engineer on the same car as him. So we had a really good relationship. But worked with Danny for a year and a bit. The team decided to swap Danny and Max when the whole chaos happened with signs. And then my first race with Max, I don't know this kid at all. It's like he's this fiery kid from Toro Rosso, and he rocks up, and yeah, it's racing. The Mercedes tangled at Barcelona, opened up the race, and that was my first race win in Formula One, which was emotional.
I can imagine, mate. So let me take a step back for a second then, Blake. I know my subs will be keen to get all the cheeky anecdotes and the inside line on the drivers that you worked with. So you worked with Perez and DeResta.
Yep.
Could you tell that Perez, as versus DeResta, would potentially go on to great things and become one of a serial race winner? Was there any giveaways in their telemetry, or when you were working with Perez might be a cheeky step ahead here?
I feel like when I worked with Paul, I was still so new and I was still learning so much. Like, honestly, I didn't feel comfortable doing that job until doing it for 2 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's, this is me going from nothing to being a lot of pressure,
Yes.
in the big show, and not having all the experience I needed to do the job. If that makes sense. So
Yes.
I didn't really know what it was, different drivers were like. So my first snapshot was Paul. Good feedback, good driver. He put in some mean laps at the time, but that car, that Force India at the time, was a handful. They were pushing lots of boundaries of suspension setup to get the aero working and everything else, and it was a tough time. I think it was probably the last year, but that was probably pretty tough. And then Checo shows up, a little bit timid, really easy to get along with, dude. I had a really easy working relationship with him. He wasn't too demanding. But it was the thing that became very clear very quickly was his ability to do this race engineer's wet dream conundrum, which was go fast, save tires.
Love that.
You see it all the time, and I think it was one of the things that he had over his teammates, especially like Hulkenberg. He just had the sense for it, and then now you see him in the Red Bull, and you see him doing very well in the racing. He's finding his gap in qualifying, and even at times, completely outdoing Max on a weekend,
which is bonkers.
Yeah, which is nuts. Like there's those generational talents in the field right now, and I think you've got Alonso still, you've got Seb, you've got Lewis for sure, and then I think Max has cemented himself as one of those generational talents. Love him or hate him, but like these guys are the real deals, and you never really know what you got. And when you get a teammate come up against them, and they're offering a challenge every now and then, and several weekends out of the season, and they can race exceptionally well, you start to reassess the stock. Like the same thing with Russell. Nobody really knew where he stood. Lewis is not having any luck at all. That's for sure. But nobody's sitting there thinking George is a slouch. We're like, is this the next one, man? Is he the next dude?
Mate, heir apparent, absolutely for George.
Yeah.
Go on,
that's kind of like the scope of drivers, like the experience, and Max was something completely different to that.
Did you know very early on that this dude was just on a completely different level in terms of speed?
Yeah, so Spain, dub straight away in the new car.
Unbelievable.
Monaco, disaster. And then after that, there was this fire that was lit, and it's like you've seen laps in P1. It's like, hey man, it's P1, calm down. But so that was kind of where it was at. You knew the guy was a contender. 100% was going to be a contender.
You could just see it. And how was your working relationship with him before?
Easy.
Really?
I got on all the guys I worked with. I got along with.
Did you not get sworn at any point?
but like it's the same thing. It's like if in the heat of the moment, if somebody's like, "What the f? The brake maps are terrible," I'd be like, well, "That's on me."
Yeah,
like it. That's on me, and I'm like, right, I'm not going to do that again. But for the most part, working relationship was awesome. It was very direct. I knew what I had to do, ask the questions I need to. We had the dialogues we needed to. The drivers I got along with the best were the drivers that were receptive to suggestions. They're not like, you're just some dumb performance engineer that's never driven a Formula One car around Monte Carlo. I'm like, no, I'm not one of those dudes actually. But at the same time, like there was this back and forth, and that was when you knew you had a good relationship with the driver, and the same dialogues back and forth with the race engineer. So it's a really important dynamic, the three. Absolutely. And then you include the controls engineer on top of that, and the engine guys as well. And it's like, then you've got a good gel. Easy to work with. All the guys I've been with are super easy to work with.
Love that, Blake. Got so many bloody follow-up questions, mate. How am I going to address them all in the time? Okay, so in order then, I wanted to talk about Max as a generational talent, and a load of my subscribers would be like, well, human error champ, what are you talking about? Yeah. I've argued long since that we talk about 2021. Surely, if I put my racing cap on, over the 22 races, Max was incredible. If you rate Lewis Hamilton as a 7-time champion,
absolutely. Anybody that doesn't,
then surely you've got to gauge and rate Max's performance within that context, right? If Lewis Hamilton is one of the best peddlers that we've ever seen, and Max can even take him close, let alone beat him regardless of the circumstance, then surely Max needs to be recognised as a potential future great also.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And the way last season ended, nobody wanted to see the season end like that. All that result for the season did was take some, supposed to be impartial third party that makes the whole thing go around. Then all that did was you take these two fan bases, you put them in each other's throats. And to be completely fair, there were enough shenanigans between the two guys through the whole season where it's like, if they're like not black and white, if they're a little bit 50-50, you're always going to side with the guy that you've been backing for.
Absolutely.
So I get that. I try to avoid that stuff because it's a waste of energy for me.
It's toxic, mate. Yeah. So toxic, the space. And even now on Twitter every day, closer player questing whether this is for me because it just gets too bloody toxic from all sides, by the way. It's just like flipping over.
I'm not calling any teams, man. I'd love to see everybody on the same team, and I hope to see the Mercedes back in the fight soon. Because like this is what we've been waiting for. We've had all these seasons where the races are particularly uneventful. You've got 3-tier racing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, what if we had 3, maybe even 4 cars in the fight, man?
Dying for it, Blake.
And that's the stuff that I get excited about. And as me having taken my engineer hat off, because when you're engineering a car, you can follow the season, but you don't know what's going on at the races. And afterwards, you're too effed to go back and watch the whole race. I would sometimes, but now getting to be a fan again of the sport and to see how toxic the space can be, I'm just like, I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to devote any energy to that anymore at all.
Absolutely.
I'm going to focus on how spectacular is this. Last week, Monaco, how nerve-wracking was it to see Ferrari crumble under pressure? And that's not a dig at them,
mate.
But it happens, man. These guys are no slouches, and oof.
Yeah,
oof. That was a tough one.
Oof is the word. Yeah, so I watched your video on Monaco, and you broke it down really, really nicely, right? Talking about be on the right tyres. In a synopsis, you've got to be on the right tyre at the right time, right?
That is the game of the wet in Formula One. You cannot extrapolate. The driver tells you when it's too wet, and you tell them when it's dry enough.
Wow.
That's it. Right tire, right time. That is the golden rule of wet weather racing.
I love that, Blake.
Don't hope. Don't hope.
That deal in certainty, eh?
That being said, though,
rain was coming, 20 minutes away.
Yeah, but Carlos coming out of that looking like a legend. And to be fair, I mean, when you look at your stops and you put your car into traffic, when you have to box into traffic, that nobody's gonna be perfect. Was it better? Could it have been worse? Yes, he got absolutely hosed by blue flag unluck, but that's motor racing, and it wasn't malicious, and it was just the chaos that happens that everybody loves, man.
This is racing. You make a good point about that blue flag that not many people have touched on, and Mr. Latifi not bloody getting out the way. Give that man a penalty, surely.
Yeah, bro.
I was going to say then, Blake, you touched on the kind of holy trinity of a racing relationship: the driver, the engineer, and the dynamicist. I think you said.
So, race engineer, driver, performance engineer, and then that's your key. Go faster on the track. And the other people that help, actually just as important as like your engine performance engineer guy, to make sure the engine's drivability, you're getting the power, energy deployment the way you need it for all your strategies, and your control systems engineer, making sure all the driver's interactions with the car and the steering wheel are right. His starts are good. His torque maps are making the car drivable, and it's
I love
a
that.
lot.
I love that. So the question I was going to ask as a Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton fan, excuse me, I've been reading a lot lately about the relationship between Lewis Hamilton and his strategists. And the thought experiment goes, you have two scenarios, and you probably speak to this better than I could. Scenario A, that you choose potentially a suboptimal strategy with a view to keep the 7-time champion Sir Lewis Hamilton happy? Because he's quite emotive in the car, right? And he gets down very easily. Scenario B is that you choose an optimal strategy per Imola, because he wanted to stay out on those dries where on those wets where dries were the right decision. So scenario B, Blake, choose an optimal strategy that potentially pisses off Lewis Hamilton. Which of those two, and it's a very linear thought experiment, and there will always be shades of grey in between, which of those two, if you had to pick over the course of a 22 race season, do you think you want to prioritise? Keep the guy happy or choose an optimal strategy and piss off your driver potentially?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because the way I think about that at the end of the day is the driver A should always want to be on the best strategy, optimally. The strategist and the engineer should also know what that is.
Yes.
If there's uncertainty, present that uncertainty. But for the most part, that you want to say, driver, you're one of the fastest drivers in the world. Go out and do that fastest driver in the world thing. We will make sure that you can put on the right tires to go as quick as possible at the right time. We will try to stop you, avoid traffic. We will try to keep you ahead of cars. If you have a window over a car, we will not leave you out to dry and box you behind somebody. That's the goal. And at the end of the day, there is chaos and there is uncertainty, especially in wet weather conditions. You do not know how much faster. You look at Perez's laps on the intermediate. His second and third flying laps on the intermediate. I don't think anybody expected him to be that fast.
Unbelievable.
And then that's what caught Ferrari out. So I feel like as an engineer, if you've got a strategy, for example, that annoys your driver, it's because you've probably not elaborated the entire story. Because at the end of the day, the driver sees, and guys like Lewis know what's going on. They know how, they can approximate how a race will unfold.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't tell your driver, right, we're going to stop in 2 laps for this tire. We think this tire has this pace. We think we can go to this lap, and we'll put us here at the end. At the end of the day, you're trying to give them enough information to keep them motivated and in the fight. Because, you're not going to tell them, it's like, hey, by the way, our fastest race finishes us 9th. You're not going to tell your driver that, are you?
Absolutely not. Love that.
But in hindsight, I think there's got to be trust between the strategist and the engineers and the driver. Because at the end of the day, if you can go back and look at hindsight and say, never mind extrapolating forward what happened, looking at this point, how did you miss this? And if you see that happening a lot, you have a word with your strategist. But their strategists are good strategists. Just sometimes it is unfortunate that, you get put in difficult situations.
Oh, mate. Mercedes, AMG Petronas, I think we need to get this guy on board here. The way he talks.
They don't want me.
The cut of his jib. Geez, we need clarity and transparency in communication. And that, for me, is what we, Mercedes fans, and Lewis in particular, aren't getting at the moment, resulting in all these dodgy outcomes. But
I think if you take some of these races and you go back and look at them from the strategist's point of view, I think they become a little bit more clear. And sometimes the outcome is going to be dire anyway,
True.
So, realistically, I think they're doing probably the best job they can. I don't think they're slouches at all.
Wow.
But you don't win every day.
This is true. I'll defer to you on that, Blake. You know more than me. I've done so many bloody thought experiments. Imola, for example, I'm watching Danny Rick gap Max Verstappen. I'm like, well, surely now's the time to jump on the tyres. If Danny Rick, who was previously trundling around in 20th, can hold off Max Verstappen and, I don't know, fend off the blue flags because he's gaining on him. His deltas are positive versus Max.
He's got gap. He's gapping.
So if I can see that and you can see that, then surely James Shovlin or Vowell, Andrew Shovlin, James Vowell, should be able to see that also. But anyway,
those guys aren't dorks, man. Those guys are the real deal. But at the end of the day, it's very easy to look when you come back and blood, sweat, and tears that you've put into your team, and you see the team having a bad result. Your first result is, your first thing is, did the team mess up? Did my driver mess up? And it's this emotional thing because you don't want to believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes actually it's not the driver, it's not the team. It was the whole thing together, and like that was the best that you're gonna get out of it.
Jeez.
And getting unlucky, it happens. That's racing, man.
Well, I defer to you on that, mate.
No, I don't
You're
know,
killing
man.
me.
But like I see a lot of like going back to the toxicity and people like for sure teams do mess up and it's good to see them own up to it. And usually they do. But like yeah, I'll leave it at that. You know?
Full stop. Very diplomatic and
Yeah.
tactful there, Blake. I can't hate that. Go on then. Talk to us about Red Bull, your experience. I've heard you speak to it before, and I think you said on one of your videos on the Break Triple R F1 YouTube channel, go and check that out and subscribe, guys, because sick information as always. On one of those videos, you said if you were ever going to go back, which I don't think you are, that you would happily go back and rejoin Red Bull. That would be the only team for you potentially. Talk to me about that then, Blake, and tell me why.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, the two teams that I've worked at have a very relaxed environment and not a particularly corporate or strict environment. I spent some time visiting McLaren. We used their simulator, and it was very, shirt and tie, not in tie, but shirt looking. Everybody's smart, everything in a line. Whereas Red Bull was just a little bit more chilled out. I got along with everybody I worked with very well. And if I didn't get along with people, I could tell them about it and we could figure it out, kind of thing. It just resonates with me. And then from the things I hear about other teams, I think they might be a little bit too corporate for me. So which is not a bad thing. It's just like it was my jam and I enjoyed it. I had a great time. I had a good working relationship with everybody there. And it was a good place, but I didn't leave because I didn't like the place.
Yeah.
I left because 10 years of doing any one thing is enough for me.
Love that. That.
And people like I think I pissed some people off on Twitter, which is very rarely my intention. I don't like shit posting,
Yeah.
I like, thoughtful conversation, but every now and then I bite the bait. But anyway, the reason I do this now is not because basically I realized there was something going on. It's like me. I like brewing beer. I like brewing beer because I like sharing it with friends.
Love that.
I don't like drinking all the beer for myself. The only reason I go through the laborious process of making ale is to enjoy it with people. And then, through streaming, first the gaming platform and then the motorsport Formula One area, it's like imagine that you could share something with more people.
I love that, mate.
So that's my analogy, man. It's like, it's why I make beer. It's why I do this. And I can't, like, realistically, if I was still working for the team, I couldn't be having these conversations about stuff.
Indeed.
It's not right to have a media personality as a person under a team. And it takes too much time. You know exactly how much time this stuff takes, man.
Oh, mate, massive. It's a full-time gig, isn't it, Blake?
Absolutely.
I wanted to reflect on something that you said about the working culture of Red Bull, because I've reflected on this, and this is me just speculating, Blake, because I'm not as close to these teams and their ways of working as yourself. But I remember in Drive to Survive, again, another toxic subject that permeates F1. Oof.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember in Drive to Survive, Christian Horner taking a jab at Toto Wolff, saying, you know what? He's not a proper racing man. And then the production scanned to Toto Wolff's private jet with the Financial Times on there. And you know what? As much as Christian Horner is a polemic figure, I've bought in to this thesis, Blake, that he's absolutely about this racing life, and he will do whatever it takes, within reason, of course, not cheating, to get it done. And all of the Lewis Hamilton fans everywhere in the world absolutely hate Christian Horner. I'm convinced, when I did my awards last season, he absolutely nailed the team principle, because the way that he's crafted Red Bull in his image, then they never hesitate to play the Joker. Their risk management in real time is on point. So there were so many instances last year, even Abu Dhabi, right? Pit him, let's put the softs on. If there is something that's going to happen, let's make sure we're positioned to nail it if that happens. And then Latifi crashes, and then all of a sudden, there's your miracle, right? So if I were going, I suppose the question I'm going to ask you, really long-winded way of putting it.
I like the backstory because it tells me how you've approached the question, which is great.
So I would always say then, from team principles currently on the grid, if I were in the trenches with one Blake, irrespective of who I like or dislike, I'm picking Christian Horner every day of the week as a racing man. He will go to war for you. And even, I suppose, Blake, even if I cite this as another example. So Silverstone happened last year, and Lewis Hamilton fans around the world,
another not controversial race at all, by the way.
Mate, go on then. I'm going to stop talking. In fact, I'll finish off the point, and then you can nail this Silverstone. Yeah. So Silverstone happened, and Christian Horner went out to bat for Max Verstappen as far as the PR. Yeah. Well, I hope you punish Lewis because you should never put a wheel up the inside of cops. Now, that's debatable, right? But as a team principle, that's what you say because you're going to bat for Mr. Verstappen. This is a very close championship. Absolutely. Monza happens, and all I hear out of Toto Wolff is, you know what? Whatever the stewards decide, we'll go with it. It's like a completely chalk and cheese approach. One's going for the results and looking to nail it, looking to maximise everything, all facets of the race for his team and his driver, and the other is kind of like a nicey Six Sigma type manager who's read all the textbooks.
Just trust the system. I don't know, man. I like both of them for completely different reasons. At the same time, like you're always gonna back your dude. You're always gonna back your dude, and you're seeing it now. With Lewis having a very unlucky streak in a not particularly strong car, you see Toto on the hype game. You know, he's like, "Don't worry, we've got this. It was unlucky. It was unfortunate." So
absolutely,
you gotta admire both of those things realistically. Love either, hate either. I know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah,
and if some of those positions or that they take bother you, it's because they're doing what's best in the best interest for their team. It doesn't matter, right, wrong, politics, whatever. But
which one you taking in the trenches, Blake? If you had to pick one, Christian or Toto?
I think I'm taking CH, man. But it's not an easy decision in my opinion, because I think both of them have very differing backgrounds and strengths as a team manager, team principal, and somewhere between the two of those is probably the best there ever was.
That's a bloody good shout, Blake.
Somewhere between the two of those, man.
That's the only point that I disagree with you on thus far in this conversation. I think it's a no-brainer. I'm taking Christian Horner into the trenches every single day of the week, Blake. No,
he's got the machete out, bro.
Oh, mate, straight away. Everything is drawing for everything. The growl, M30, whatever you want.
He's gone for the neck.
Meta weapons. Meta weapons
the
only
growl.
for me.
How long has it been since he played Warzone?
Mate, I don't know what's going on. I can't.
Me neither, man.
My update's probably about 100 gigabytes waiting to update now. It's been
Bro,
it's been ages. Right then, Blake, as we round third base, I'm going to have to get you on, mate. I've got so many more questions about Red Bull. We're going to have to get you on again at some point when your schedule frees up. As we round third, though, I'm going to ask you a couple quick fire questions, and then I will let you skedaddle. So, what's your favourite track on the grid currently?
I really love Spa-Francorchamps.
Mate, there you
go.
Bro,
it's a classic. It's got all the hairy stuff. It's got speed. It's got technical.
Incredible.
There's something about that place. And then also leaving the circuit on a bicycle, you go through the campsites. There's the party atmosphere. Everybody's, it's like, I want to stay for a beer, but I've got to cycle, 20, 30 miles to the hotel.
Oh my gosh.
Spa's beautiful. I like all the classic European races realistically. I think it's definitely Spa.
Spa is incredible.
And it would be a disaster to see it gone from the calendar.
Speaking of which, Blake, Monaco in 2023 or nah?
Keep it.
Keep it.
Yeah.
Jeez. We're going to have to delve into that another time because that
Yeah.
is becoming a very controversial one, isn't it?
I get it. Let's put it this way. Monaco, great event, crap race.
There we go, mate.
Great event, crap race.
Summed it up nicely.
That was the first time I got super jacked up about qualifying in a while.
Yeah, fair. It was mission critical, right? Jeez, Charles was incredible, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
Flawless, bro.
Mate, incredible. Shame we didn't get to see him finish off that bloody red flagged one. Could have been a moment. Could have been a moment. Okay, cool. Generational talent between Max, pick one, Charles, Georgie Russell, and Lando.
I think it's got to be Max right now because I'm super biased, bro. But like being so close to that and experiencing that amount of raw talent, is humbling. I think all the other three, put them in the same car. Who knows, bro?
Yeah,
they look phenomenal. All of them, for sure.
Yeah, fair.
Anybody who says otherwise is a fraud, in my opinion.
I can't
Come on.
say fairer than that, Blake. I think you're onto something. Okay, cool. The issues that matter: Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Mate, there's only one answer there, of course.
Yeah.
Favorite driver in all of history, excluding the guys that you worked with?
That's a tough one because I don't go back that far, realistically. So I don't have a personal attachment to like Prost and Senna and those guys. Probably Schumacher.
Love that. Schumi. Again, next time I have you on, we're going to have to do a bit of a deep dive on his offspring, Mr. Mick. Okay, final one then. Drive to Survive, foe or friend? Have you watched it?
I've watched season 1 and 2. It's good. You know what? If it's here's how I look at Drive to Survive, and I'm not one of those, like, there's people that are super elitist about Formula One. Like, if you're a Drive to Survive fan, you're not a real fan. Dude, anybody that turns the race on or buys any merch or consumes any media concerning Formula One is a fan. It doesn't matter.
So true.
Drive to Survive is a really good gateway. And if you're, if you stop at the door at Drive to Survive, that's okay. You've already bought into it. You're feeding the machine. Does it make the sport better or worse? I'm not sure. It gets more interest and more money into the sport. Does it help us as, enthusiasts, as fans? It gives us more people to talk to. It gives us more of an audience. And then they say, I really like all of Cameron's takes on everything. He's got great conversation. These people that were watching Drive to Survive over lockdown, they're consuming your content now.
Absolutely, mate. A rising tide floats all boats, eh? Absolutely.
DTS are friends, bro.
Yeah.
Don't get it mixed up.
I can't hate that, Blake. I desperately want to bloody disagree with you.
I know you do, and I want to disagree with me on that, man. But
you're nailing it. Absolutely nailing it every time. And then lastly, mate, hopes for F1 in 2022 and beyond.
3-car championship race.
Let's
go. Three minimum. I really feel like Mercedes belongs there. They've taken some gambles on this year's car, in which they've admit that they missed the trick. And that's what happens when you have new regulations. These things, like, people, somebody got mad at me thinking I was taking the piss out of them on the internet, but they sarcastically tweeted that it's not like it's rocket science, and it's true. It's not rocket science, but at the end of the day, there's so much chaos in engineering these things, stuff that we don't know, stuff that we don't have the capacity to model and comprehend. And when somebody drops the ball and misses the trick, it's gonna happen. And if you're at the top, the only place to go is down.
Jeez.
But people like Mercedes definitely have the infrastructure, the resources, and the brain power to be back up on the top.
I love that.
Easy.
Blake.
So we just need, the only other one that seems like they're sniffing around is, we need McLaren to come at it as well. and then we're in for a proper, like, 2-tier Formula One. You got the front of the pack, which is 8 cars.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my hopes.
I love
That's
that.
my hopes. They're selfish. I just want drama. I want chaos.
Absolutely, mate.
And I would love to see the FIA being very clear, direct, and transparent to avoid the Twitter court. Because, like, I get it that it's like it's good for conversation engagement, but very rarely, for the most part, you're so closely attached to your team and your car and your driver that stuff just flares people up. And if the FIA, especially race control, were on top of stuff during the race, for example, the pit lane thing, that did not need to wait until after the race. They have the information or they don't. If they need more capacity in race control to support the race director, get on that. All you're doing is making a farce of the thing. To have a protest after the race. The same thing happened with Perez's safety car in Jeddah. When Perez comes out on the line and it takes them until they restart the race to ask him to give the spot back. I'm like,
unbelievable. What are they doing?
You've got all the car feeds. You know exactly the time at which it happens. You can rewind to these things. And if you don't have the ability to do that, hire some people, write some tools, make the sport better for us so that you don't have everybody at each other's throats after the end of every Grand Prix because everybody's trying to Twitter court, the FIA's decision process. I want to see them. I don't want to hear about it. I want to focus on the good stuff, and I don't want to get hung up spending 2 days debating stuff on the internet about right or wrong. They need to own up after last year and what happened. They said they were going to step up. They need to step up.
Nailed it, sir. Bloody Nora, spokesman extraordinaire. This is why he earns the big bucks. Mercedes AMG Petronas. I think you need this man amongst your ranks. Incredible, sir.
They don't need me.
Couldn't have said it better. Right, listen, mate, I'm going to, as we round fourth base, let me big up your channels, of course, first and foremost. If you haven't been on Break F1 YouTube channel, what are you doing? What have you been playing at? This man used to work for Red Bull. He's got the inside line on Max Verstappen, data for days. You can, of course, catch him at Break. That's R on Twitch and Twitter. And YouTube, same word, Break, R F1 on YouTube and TikTok. I'm going to say that again for those that are short and didn't understand. The guys that are illiterate like me. Twitch and Twitter, Break, Bravo, Romeo, Alpha, Kilo, Echo. TikTok, YouTube, same word, Break with the R and then an F1 after. Check him out. He's unbelievable.
Appreciate you, bro.
Market disruptor. Incredible. Right. Listen, mate, you've been more than generous with your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure,
you
Cameron.
As always. Got to get you back on at some point, Blake.
Dude,
we've got so many more things to touch on.
I need to grill you next time, man.
Oh,
I
mate.
need to grill you next time. We're going to have some great conversations, you and I, man, and I'm looking forward to the chance. All right, brother?
Let's get it going, Blake. Absolutely. Look forward to it. Guys, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. I'm not going to read them all out to you. If you're listening on podcast, get it on, like, rate and review, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that good stuff. And as always, peddlers, remember, look, but never stare.